Right, so what I thought we'd do for the class tonight is think a little bit about the prayer we often call the Lord's Prayer. I think I was given the title by another ecclesia calling it the pattern prayer, which is, yes, at least half of what it is. So it's a good title, I think. And we're going to look at it in 3 stages. First of all, we're going to think about, well, actually, which prayer are we talking about? And you may think that's a bit strange when I've just said which one it is. We've just read the prayer, but you'll see what I mean as we get on to that one in a minute. Then we'll just look at how the prayer is structured a little bit. And then we'll lead on to thoughts on each section of the prayer. And as we go through from section 1 to 3, I think it will get less dry, academic, historical, whatever, towards exhortational, practical, thinking about how we actually pray and what it is we're praying for as we go. So if you're not the sort who likes the more academic stuff, well, bear with me, please, as we go through towards the end of the class. Okay, so first of all then, which prayer? So the first thing I'd like you to do is just, if you know the prayer already, or you think you know the prayer already, just have a little moment or two to recite it mentally to yourself in your head as you have come to know it, in the form of words that you have come to know it, sort of traditionally. I'm going to give you sort of 30, or I'm going to do it myself, so you've got the times. Here we go. Okay, so I've given you about the same time as it's taken me. Now, I'm pretty confident, almost word for word, I know what the majority of you did that in your head. I think it was this. It was, Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Now, you may have said on, but in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive them that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Okay, so was I right? I can see some of you. Thumbs up from some of you. Yeah, pretty good. Yeah, okay. I'm just scrolling through. Good. Okay. Right. Good. I'm glad that we agreed on that. That's what we sort of thought of as our standard form of the prayer. We'll come back to that in a few minutes' time. Right. There you go. Then on the screen is, I'm using ESV as sort of the base version tonight. That's the ESV's translation into more modern English, but following pretty much the same sort of form of words, not too dissimilar. Still got the halloweds in there, even in the ESV these days. And the ESV puts some footnotes against the text of the prayer that the Lord taught in Matthew's version. There they are on the screen for you. Let's just see what they are. First one and the second one are pretty similar to one another, actually. The first one is against hallowed be your name, and it's perhaps doing 2 things at once in that note, where it says, or let your name be kept holy, or let your name be treated with reverence. Well, the first thing it's trying to do, I think, is trying to explain, perhaps if you didn't know what hallowed meant, which maybe a lot of people these days don't know what hallowed means. It's got this idea of reverence and holiness to it. But it's got another second thing going on in there also about perhaps explaining just this bold, it feels like a bold sort of statement or a direction towards God. Hallowed be your name. Let your name. It's sort of softening it perhaps a bit, or explaining that what you're asking, you're asking God that something might happen. It's just helping perhaps with extra words. And the second footnote is doing something similar then with the next one. Your kingdom come, your will be done. Or let your kingdom come, let your will be done. And we'll come back to, when we get to the structure part 2, we'll come back to this seemingly brevity and sort of almost terseness of language that there is in the prayer. And is it really, it's something that struck me actually about the prayer before I read this note. It's strange language, perhaps a little bit in English for us today. Do we feel like we're being a little bit bossy with God in the language? We'll come back to that in the second part. Third note, so this is interesting, isn't it? 4 footnotes here in a little section, when the ESV doesn't do a whole lot of footnotes generally in its sort of standard editions. And all of a sudden in this little section, this prayer, we've got 4 footnotes. Give us this day our daily bread. And we've got a footnote there that says, oh, well, actually, maybe it's not daily bread, maybe it's bread for tomorrow. If we've got time, we may run out of time here, we may get on to the idea of daily or bread for tomorrow, because actually that's an interesting little nugget in this prayer. That one of the most obscure words in the Greek New Testament comes in the Lord's Prayer, and it's this word that's translated often daily. Nobody's sure exactly what it means, or with certainty perhaps is the answer to say what it means. And the last one comes with deliver us from evil. And again, we've got 2 things going on in our 4th footnote. The first one is, well, maybe we should, instead of saying deliver us from evil as some sort of force, thing that's out there as an intangible thing, it should be deliver us from the evil one, however we might understand the evil one as a personality, whether it's a full-blown thinking of the devil with his horns based in hell or whatever, or just some sort of personification of the concept of evil. So a bit of ambiguity as to how to translate the underlying Greek of the evil. And the second thing that's going on with that footnote then is there's this addition that we all said was in the standard form that we've learned, that's not in the ESV's version. For yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. We said forever and ever, but here forever. Amen. So let's just think about that last one first a bit more. We're still thinking about which prayer, what's the actual form of the prayer we ought to be thinking about. Why does that last section disappear from the ESV? Yours is the kingdom, the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen. That's what I'm calling the doxology, the sort of giving God the glory at the end. So it's not just the ESV that removes it. In fact, pretty much any modern version will take it out and say it's not part of the original New Testament text as far as we can understand it or know it. The New King James Version of all the modern versions is pretty much alone in retaining it. And I guess that's doing it because of the way that the New King James does its decisions on choosing what ought to be in the text and what ought not to be in the text from the various different manuscripts from olden days that exist, and they take a different approach to most other modern versions. So there you go. The reason it's taken away because there are a whole bunch of textual variants when you look at all the old documents scattered from around the Mediterranean, dug up and kept in libraries, etc., etc. There's other variations that are around. The one that we're familiar with is, yes, the King James Version, the New King James Version is the most common of all the variants, if it's to be included, but there are others too. There are ones that are sort of Trinitarian in nature to round off the prayer. There's very early versions that have it but lack parts of it. So the Didache is a early, maybe 2nd century Christian writing that quotes the Lord's Prayer in full as something to be recited and learnt and said every day, but even it does not have and the kingdom part of it in it. So the general consensus is, well, there's enough manuscripts without it in from a lot of different places to suggest that perhaps it got added later as some sort of way of coming to a conclusion for the prayer. Because, face it, if we were to finish the prayer with lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil, I think we'd all pretty much agree, whatever we think about textual variants and translation methods, we'd all agree that's a bit of an abrupt way of coming to a conclusion in a prayer towards God. We feel like we need something to round it out. And suggestion is that perhaps the way of rounding it out that's crept into our scriptures taken a lot of influence from 1 Chronicles 29. You might want to just have a look at 1 Chronicles 29. See if I can get rid of that for a minute. Stop sharing. Did I do that? Okay, yeah. So 1 Chronicles chapter 29, verses 11 to 13. So you've got a congregational prayer at the time of David here, at the time of sort of dedication for the temple with a great assembly in Jerusalem. David blesses the Lord in the presence of all the assembly, verse 10, and he says, "Blessed are you, O Lord, the God of Israel, our Father, forever and ever." Interesting, our Father. Yours, O Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the victory and the majesty, for all that is in the heavens and in the earth is yours. We've got heavens and earth, haven't we, in the Lord's Prayer? Yours is the kingdom, O Lord, and you are exalted as head above all. So I think perhaps you could see there that the way that David prays in the congregational setting, how that might be adapted and it felt fitting for a conclusion of congregational use of the Lord's Prayer at later times. Okay, let me go and share my screen again. Right, that's what we just said. Right, now we need to introduce the fact that Matthew 6 is not the only time the Lord teaches this form of sort of prayer. Luke also has recorded a time when the Lord taught the prayer to his disciples. And there it is on the screen in both the ESV and the New King James. And we've got this textual issue again going on, that there are different versions in the different texts of the old documents. And you can see that the King James has got quite a lot added to it that's not included in the way that the ESV have selected their text for translation. And I think you can see that the bits in red that are the added bits, the bits that you can find in some texts, but not others, in the New King James have used, what's happening there is that we're getting a much more similar form of words when we do put all the additions back in the New King James to what's in Matthew, you know, whether we're looking at the New King James or the ESV. So again, there's a question of which is the right form of words. We can have a debate and discussion about it, I guess, and experts debate and discuss over it. But again, it's only the ESV really that goes with longer form in Luke. And one thing I think you can see from the Luke version, whether it's either the New King James or the ESV is that neither one on this occasion has that extra bit at the end. Yours is the kingdom, the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen. So there was definitely a time when the Lord taught the prayer and it didn't have that bit on it. That's just the point that someone makes about preferring the way the ESV do it to the New King James. I'll skip over that. I'll skip over this too. There's another interesting textual there in Luke, and that's that sometimes we get in texts, not many times, this doesn't happen very often, but there have been texts found where your kingdom come or hallowed be your name in the standard version that we know gets replaced with the Holy Spirit come upon us and cleanse us. Not only in one or two texts of Luke that have been found, but also in some ancient commentaries on the prayer. So this is Christian writers writing, in the centuries after the apostles, and the prayer as they know it, being in Luke, as they know it at least, has that the Holy Spirit come upon us and cleanse us in the text, and so they comment upon it when they write about the Lord's Prayer. How might that have happened? Well, again, we're sort of in realm of speculation, aren't we? But one of the ideas around is that if this prayer was taken for Christian worship collectively, perhaps there were times when it got adapted to fit the circumstances, and if there was a time of baptism, maybe the form of words about the Holy Spirit coming and cleansing might have been something that the Christians at that point in time may have found to be suitable for use instead of other parts to it. Speculation. Right, this is now as ultimate and as dry as it gets before hopefully it gets as wetter. Is that the right word? I don't know. This is now putting aside the New King James, assuming that ESV has a comparison of Matthew, as Jesus taught the prayer in Matthew, and as Jesus taught the prayer in Luke, and just to see that actually, when we're even looking at same translation, selecting from the same way of text, there are variations between the two occasions. So the way that it works on the screen is that the stuff in white is basically the same stuff on both occasions. And there's not, it's, what is it, something like 40% white? It's not a massive match, is it? The stuff in yellow, underlined, bold, is in Matthew's account, but it's just totally missing from Luke's account. Even to the small stuff of, well, it's our Father. It's not just Father, it's our Father, as Jesus teaches in Matthew. The stuff in orange, and I don't know if it looks orange, it's sort of pinky salmon colour, isn't it? Underlined again, and sometimes at least it's in italics. And that stuff is stuff that looks the same in English, basically, but digging down into the Greek, it's actually sort of, you can see it's different. It is noticeably different in Greek. It might not necessarily make massively different in meaning, but there is some form of difference in the underlying Greek. So, for example, just resting on the idea of give, halfway down, give us this day, give us each day. In Matthew's account, it's it's one sort of tense. But the tense is being used in Matthew because it's sort of accompanying this day, the fact that it's one day, there's a moment, and it's now. Whereas the tense is slightly different in Luke, forgive, give us, it's the same word, but it's in a different tense, because it's give us each day. Okay, so looks same in English, slightly different underneath the bonnet. When we get to the red ones, it's ones that we can see on the surface in English it's different, and again underneath the bonnet in the Greek it is different. So again, this day and each day, you can see there's a slight difference there, isn't there? We're talking about one day, we're talking about an ongoing every day. So in the Luke account, give us each day, it's continually keep on giving us each day our daily bread. As each day comes, give us the daily bread. Whereas in Matthew, it's give us now, today, our daily bread. And we're thinking just for the moment more in Matthew. I hope that sort of makes sense. I won't unpack the rest of it, but just shows you that there is quite a bit of underlying difference between the two forms. Now, hopefully I've waffled on enough for you to forget that we started with me getting you to recite in your head your version of the Lord's Prayer, and we pretty much all agreed on what that version was that we all learned. Have you noticed yet that the thing we all agreed on was not the Bible version, whether it was Matthew or Luke? We did not say as our agreed version of this prayer either Matthew or Luke. Now, what we said was much closer to Matthew and much closer to the New King James version in Matthew. But even then, there was one big difference, really, from what the King James version has and what we think of as the standard version of the Lord's Prayer. Did anybody notice it? Does anybody know what it is? What's that big difference? Right, I'll put you out of your misery then. We all said, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Now look at Matthew chapter 6 again. Look at where the Lord taught the prayer and see if you can find the word trespass in what the Lord taught as the prayer. And whatever version you've got in front of you, I don't think you'll find it. You might find it in the chapter, it's around the prayer, but you won't find it in the actual prayer itself. So the big question is, why have we all got this idea that the sort of standard version of this prayer is forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us, when it's not the version that's in any of our Bibles, whichever version we happen to want to use? And I think the answer is, I don't know if you can see that, I think it's that. See that? Common Prayer. Yeah. So when I read it, when I recited it, I was careful to read it word for word from, you can see that, there it is, from the Common Book of Prayer. To me, it looks like it's inverted like in a mirror. I think you can probably see it the right way around. Yeah, there, look, it's this one here. And that's got the word trespasses in it. And apparently, this is the time when this book was first written and constructed. That was the time that the version of the prayer that we all learned at school, that we heard recited on, morning worship or whatever on Radio 4, songs of praise, etc., etc. That's where it comes from. And I was surprised to find that out when I was doing the research for this talk. And then the question comes, well, why did they change the words? So who changed the words? Why did they change the words? And got a long story short, it appears to have been Tyndale, Coverdale, Tyndale, sort of people, those sort of famous people of English translation at the time. Why might they have done it? Well, again, I gave away the clue a bit, perhaps, that, trespasses is there in the section. We read it in our reading, verse 14, if you forgive others their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their trespasses, neither will they forgive your heavenly Father forgive your trespasses. So we got trespasses being majored upon just after the Lord's form of words, forgive us our debts as we have forgiven our debtors. And sort of in passing, if you remember the Luke version, or if you've got that open, you'll see that Luke uses the word sins and sort of seems to equate debts and sins together in this little section of the prayer. So it's pretty clear, isn't it, that when in the prayer we're talking about debts, we're really focused on trespasses, sins. Forgive us our sins as we forgive others our sins. That's what is being intended by the idea of this word debt. But of course, the word debt, primarily its original thing. It's got some sort of financial issue hanging upon it. So conjecture again, but you can just imagine, can't you? In English, in the common tongue, in the vulgar tongue of the land, for the first times, with Latin being kicked out or pushed down, maybe for the first time in, ever really, all of a sudden in the parish church, in the town church, you've got the wealthy, the lord of the manor, the clergy, and you got the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, etc., the farmer, all together reciting the form of words. And you can understand why it might be in the authority's interests. So just want to make it very clear in the prayer that we're talking about sins being forgiven. We're not talking about financial debts being forgiven. We're not talking about, as you leave the church, going, it's all right, I don't need to pay my rent this month or ever again, sort of thing. So you can see that there might be some sort of societal reason why we've brought trespasses explicitly into our form of the standard form that we have learned to recite rather than the biblical version. But interestingly, it's not the biblical version. Right. All that said, we need to move on to the outline as part 2, because I've spent far too long on part 1. So we're thinking about the prayer as a whole. In Matthew chapter 6, the Lord prefaces his words that he wants us to take note of with, pray then like this. Now that suggests to me, it's the word like in there, I suppose. That suggests to me that what he's giving us or suggesting there is an idea of a pattern. Something we might use as a template, something we might see as potentially something to work off of and to work with and maybe not away from, but to expand upon in our thinking and in our prayers. There's other things to notice about the Matthew account and when we're thinking about the context for the prayer. And that's the warnings that were given previously. So verse 7, when you pray, do not heap up empty phrases as the Gentiles do, for they think they will be heard for their many words. Your Father knows what you need before you ask him, which, raises perhaps the question, why do we ask in the first place then? Leave that to one side. But there's this warning, isn't there, about many words. So one of the things we've got here is a form of words that conspicuously is not many words. You know, there is a brevity to what we're given here, and we're taught to pray like this. Now, there's something also in all of that then about there are wrong ways to pray. You know, that we can get it wrong. And that the whole thing, the wider context of the first part of Matthew chapter 6 is, do not do your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them. Do it because it's an act of faith done in secret that your heavenly Father may reward. So there's the motivation that's brought into question for us here. What's the right motivation? Do we have the right motivation for our praying? And in our praying, are we doing it in the right spirit, with the right heart? Or do not be like the Gentiles who think they'll be heard for their many words. So Luke, though, if we just maybe just want to turn over to Luke chapter 11, it's a slightly different context in which the words are introduced to us, because, well, in Matthew chapter 6 is right in the middle, isn't it, of a 3-chapter set public speech on the mountain. Whereas in Luke chapter 11, Jesus has already been praying in a certain place. His disciples have observed him, and they asked to be taught to pray as John taught his disciples. And Jesus says, when you pray, say this. So that to me suggests almost a bit more of a formula. Look, there's a suggestion that the actual exact words maybe ought to be used, at least in some sort of circumstances. It's good, it's right to focus on the actual words. When you pray, say, Father, hallowed be your name. Slightly different from a pattern where perhaps there's more of a freedom, and it's the principles and the ideas that are sort of there to work with. And of course, the context of teach us to pray is a slightly different context, isn't it? It's someone coming, not presuming to know, not getting it wrong, as it happens, some people might have been that Jesus was addressing in Matthew, but it's somebody who's saying, I don't know. I just don't know how to pray. Can you teach me how to pray? Give me something that I can say that is good. And I guess both of those things, the way that they're presented in both occasions, have their place and their purpose for us, and are both useful for us, aren't they? I found, as a president on a Sunday morning, the idea of using the pattern of the prayer, something really useful for the main prayer that I give on behalf of the brothers and sisters, maybe on that Sunday occasion. Not necessarily sticking to the exact words, but using it as a sort of almost like a bullet point to work with and make sure all of the points are picked out and I'm not deviating too far away from it onto other various different things, and that everything fits in the context. But then there's other times, aren't there, where we do, Scripture itself says we don't know how we ought to pray, and the Spirit helps with our infirmities. There are times when we just need to have something that's set, that's a ritual, it's ingrained so much within us that it comes out without even having to struggle to remember the words. So I find that useful, that there's a slight variation in the context for the prayer. Okay, there is the, let's check the time. There is the prayer then sort of set out in its component parts as it seem to me, and I think you can make a case that you start with Our Father in Heaven as like a leading sort of form of address, and then you're either into, well, I've got it as 5, but I've hedged my bets a bit to make it 5 or 7 because you've got the A's and the B's, sort of bullet points, if you like, or component parts to the prayer. But the A's and the B's are there in 2 and 5 because they're bits that you can sort of almost see as going together as one thought, whereas it's difficult to link, say, number 3 and number 4 and say that they're all part of the same discrete point. There is a difference between them. So that leads us maybe then to 5 main petitions. And I said, didn't I, and in the footnote right at the beginning, the first 2 footnotes picked up on this point about, well, is the language a little bit terse and, I don't know, maybe it sounds flippant to say, but a little bit bossy? And depends on the tone, doesn't it? Our Father, hallowed be your name, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us. Lead us not. Deliver us. And it's very easy to think of it or see or misjudge it like that in English, because it's difficult to translate, perhaps, exactly tone of voice. And again, digging into the original language, it's pretty similar perhaps to the English. Now, what we've got here is a whole load of imperatives. Okay. The thing about imperatives, though, so issues of commandment, giving out instructions, not just statements of fact. The thing about imperatives is it depends on the relative position of the one saying the thing, giving the instruction, to the one receiving it, as to quite how they're to be taken. Okay, so if you're the one at the top of the chain giving out the instruction to the one at the bottom of the chain, it's a commandment. But when we reverse it, and this is how we ought to be thinking about these imperatives, when we see ourselves at the bottom and we recognize these imperatives are addressed towards God, then they are forms of petition. Okay, so it's exactly the same form of language, but the tone totally flips because we recognize the balance in authority or power. And so when we say, hallowed be your name, give us this day our daily bread, it's not we're issuing a commandment, it's we are petitioning from a position of weakness to a higher authority. Exactly the same mechanics of language are used, but it just requires us to know our position to say it right and to mean it right. Okay. So, interestingly then, the way that this divides up is, and you may have seen this all before, the first 2 petitions are focused on God. We, first of all, direct ourselves to our thoughts towards him and away from our own circumstances. Hallowed be your name, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And then in the second half, we flip round and we are asking for ourselves now. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our debts. Lead us not into temptation. And these last 3 petitions, well, they express our dependence on our Father, don't they? And they are limited to necessities. So we said that there was, the Lord taught us not to pray in many words about many things. We are focused right in on bare essentials. And, if we'd come up with our own lists of, well, top 3 essentials, what are the things that, if there are only 3 things we're praying for ourselves, what would they be? Would they be these? Daily bread, forgiveness of sin, harm from evil. Would they be our 3 things? Those are the 3 things that the Lord teaches us are the essentials of spiritual life for us. This is bread, food, forgiveness, and security, safety. Those 3 things. Again, interestingly, in those 3 things that we're pared down to, we've got a sort of past, present, and future aspects to them, haven't we? We've got, give us this day our daily bread. That seems very much in the moment, present. Forgive us our debts as we have forgiven our debtors. Now, there are these sins, we recognise them, they've been committed already, and we have already forgiven those that have sinned against us. There are things in the past that linger that need to be dealt with. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. These things that we don't know about, the uncertainties of life, the things that may come for us, could come for us, the potential of the future, we're praying about now before it happens. So something interesting going on there. And 2 more points on the overall structure. First is that throughout the prayer, whether it's Luke or Matthew, it's a communal prayer, not personal. Or at least the form of words, the way it's expressed to us, is primarily, firstly, as a communal prayer. Our Father, not my Father. Give us, not give me. And there's clearly something important for us to learn about that in our prayers, isn't there? Not to say that it's not a prayer we ever say when we're alone. It's not to say that at all. But when we do say it when we're alone, it should, shouldn't it not, evoke for us the realization and the reminder that, but we're not alone. We're not just a disciple alone in this world, that we have brothers and sisters, that we have others that pray the same prayer, that we have responsibilities towards and we receive benefits from, and we are all brothers and sisters of our Father in heaven. And finally on this outline, there's no thanksgiving, at least I can see, obviously, in those words. I mean, maybe something implicit. Maybe we could persuade ourselves that, well, obviously, and embedded and embracing everything, there's a understood sort of thanksgiving in there, but it's not explicit. And added to that, actually, if you remember the prayers in, I'm going to just pop out that for the minute. If you remember the prayers in Luke chapter 18, there's 2 prayers in Luke 18 in the parables of the Lord, where he contrasts a prayer of a Pharisee and a tax collector gone up to the temple to pray. And if you remember, it's the Pharisee who prays a prayer of thanksgiving. And it's obviously full of the wrong sort of thanksgiving, but it's full of some sort of thanksgiving. Whereas the prayer of the tax collector, again, like our prayer that we're thinking about tonight, appears to have no thanksgiving in it, but it is the prayer that is the one that justifies the man. He says, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. You know, then there's a common theme, isn't there, with that, with our prayer of forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. So that's interesting. You may have some views on that. You may have some other ideas about Thanksgiving. And of course, the Lord on other occasions himself offered a prayer, more than one occasion, offered prayers of thanksgiving. So I'm clearly not saying don't thank God. It's just interesting, isn't it, that it's not apparently, or it's not at the forefront of our prayer. All right, now I'm looking at the time and I'm sort of thinking I've basically overshot entirely, and I feel like to start the last section would be a bit silly. So I'm going to skip a lot of the stuff that I've got here, but I do want to just go maybe then to the last section of the prayer and just think a little bit about lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. I hope you don't mind, I've sort of ditched the rest along the way, but I don't think you want me going on for the next 30 minutes either. So I thought I'd just focus on this because this section does puzzle me. It still puzzles me. I know it puzzles a lot of people. It might not puzzle you, and I hope I'm not giving you something that puzzles you where you didn't puzzle it before. But it does puzzle me. Lead us not into temptation, and in the Matthew version, but deliver us, rescue us from evil, from the evil. So what's going on there? God doesn't tempt us, does he? God wouldn't be leading us into temptation, would he? And I think, it pretty quickly comes to the answer. We can think of biblical things where God provides tests. God's whole creation involves tests. God knows the end from the beginning. God knows that people will sin. But we also know pretty clearly from scriptures that God doesn't tempt anyone with evil. And nor, that James is pretty clear in chapter 1 on that for us. So what's going on? Lead us not into temptation. And there's various solutions to this question, I guess, that have been I've come across. One is to sort of rely upon the exact form of the Greek words here and say that there's something special about the way that it's presented to us, and it can have a meaning to it of, God, as you've never done this thing before, you've never led us into temptation before, don't do it again, don't even do it in the future. Okay, so it's almost acknowledging God doesn't do this in the very way that it's being asked. That's one potential, and I'm not an expert enough to know whether that's right or not, but it feels like it's going pretty niche to try and get to something to explain away what looks like the potential that God might lead us into temptation. The second one that I thought was quite a good one to start with, but I think there's a big flaw in it, was lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. As if you take it as a flow as a whole, the way that it's structured is to focus in on the second half. That the but is signified, and in the Greek it is a sort of a hard but, not just something that's sort of like left there as it's just one of those words that can mean a few things. It's no, this is a real contrast, and I want you to notice the contrast. I'm making a contrast. Lead us not into temptation. What we're really asking you to do, God, is deliver us from evil. Get us out of bad situations. And I quite like that one. But the problem with it is that the Luke version, if you remember, it actually stopped at the lead us not into temptation. So one version that the Lord taught didn't even have the but word in it. So I think I'm left with my third option, which works quite well for me, I think. Lead us not into temptation. Not that I ever thought God was going to lead me into temptation, But I recognise that God's in control of all things, but he allows me freedom of thought and choice and action. And I'm weak. And I can find myself being led into temptation, however it is that I get it. I don't blame God for it. I'm often responsible directly for myself, and sometimes it's because of others around me. But I can find myself weak in temptation. And maybe that's what really is being addressed here. A recognition of weakness by saying, lead me not into temptation. It's a sort of roundabout way of declaring my weakness and declaring my dependence on God's guidance for the right way. And perhaps for two final scriptures, we'll just see that that's where God wishes to see, for us to see him and how he wants us to think about how he works with us. So 1 Corinthians chapter 10, which says, again, very clearly that we are tempted. God knows that we're tempted. No temptation has, that's this chapter 10, 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. Verse 12, let's start there. Therefore, let anyone who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall. No temptation has overcome you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with the temptation, not that he's led us into it, but it is there, the temptation remains. He will not let you be tempted beyond your ability, but with the temptation, he will also provide the way of escape, deliver us from evil, that you may be able to endure it. So God provides the escape route out of temptation rather than leading in to temptation. But of course, as the chapter goes on, it's for us to then take the action and make use of whatever it is that God has provided us with. Verse 14, therefore, my beloved, flee from idolatry. God's made the way out. Well, go on, take it, is what we're exhorted to do by Paul there. And finally, Psalm 23. Lead me not into temptation, but deliver me from evil. Maybe that's just another or a very similar way of saying what the first 4 verses of Psalm 23 say. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me, not into temptation. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me, not into temptation, but in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. We've skipped over really a whole section on hallowed be your name, but hallowed be your name for his name's sake. He leads me into the paths of righteousness. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Deliver me from the evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Not that God led us into temptation, but God is with us when we pray, deliver us from the evil. We again recognize our weakness and that God, we believe, as a matter of faith, is with us in our difficulties and distresses. Okay, I'll close there.